Imagine eating a handful of berries, then suddenly feeling happier, dizzier, and significantly more confident than your survival skills deserve. That's basically how humanity may have discovered alcohol. One minute you're looking for food. The next minute you're absolutely convinced that wrestling a wild boar is a fantastic idea. It isn't, but your brain doesn't know that anymore. Now imagine trying to explain this to your tribe. No, seriously, the berries made me do it. That's probably not a very convincing defense, but here's the strange part. The first alcohol wasn't beer, it wasn't wine, it wasn't even made by humans. In fact, alcohol existed millions of years before the first human was born, which means the first creature to ever get drunk probably wasn't human at all. And that raises a surprisingly fascinating question. When did humans actually start drinking alcohol? Most people think the answer begins with civilization. A farmer grows some grain. Someone accidentally invents beer. Everybody celebrates. End of story. Except that's probably not what happened, because the real story begins much earlier. Long before cities, long before farming, long before anyone had the brilliant idea of turning breakfast into a beverage. To understand why, we need to go back millions of years. Back to a world with no villages, no kings, no breweries, and definitely no happy hour. Just forests. Endless forests. And hidden among those forests was something humans would eventually become very familiar with: alcohol. Now, here's something most people don't realize: nature produces alcohol all by itself. No humans required. Whenever fruit becomes overripe, tiny organisms called yeast begin feeding on its sugars. And yeast has a very specific hobby. It turns sugar into alcohol. That's it. That's the process. Which means forests have been quietly producing alcohol for millions of years, long before beer, long before wine, long before some ancient guy looked at a pile of grain and thought, I wonder if I can make this more fun. Imagine you're one of our ancient primate ancestors. You're hungry. You've been searching for food all day. Then you smell something sweet, stronger than usual. You follow the scent and find a pile of ripe fruit on the ground. Congratulations. You've just discovered nature's oldest cocktail. Now, before you imagine prehistoric monkeys throwing jungle parties, that's probably not what happened. The alcohol content was usually low, but it was enough to matter. Enough for evolution to notice. And this is where the story gets weird. Around 10 million years ago, scientists believe one of our ancestors developed a genetic mutation affecting an enzyme called ADH4. Now, that sounds incredibly boring, but stay with me. This enzyme helps your body break down alcohol. Before the mutation, our ancestors weren't very good at processing alcohol. After the mutation, they became dramatically better. Some researchers estimate the new version worked up to 40 times more efficiently. Think about that. Millions of years before the first brewery existed, evolution may already have been preparing our ancestors to handle alcohol. Evolution basically looked into the future and said, trust me, this is going to become important. Why would that happen? Well, because alcohol wasn't just alcohol, it was a clue. The smell of alcohol often meant fruit was ripe and packed with calories. To a hungry animal, that's valuable information. Some scientists call this idea the drunken monkey hypothesis, which sounds less like a scientific theory and more like a cartoon somebody accidentally published in a research journal. But it's a real theory. The idea is that ancient primates may have followed the smell of alcohol because it helped them find food. To them, alcohol wasn't a warning sign. It was basically nature's version of a giant glowing arrow saying, calories this way. If that's true, then our relationship with alcohol may be far older than anyone once imagined. It may even be written into our biology, which is both fascinating and slightly concerning. But naturally fermented fruit is one thing. Deliberately making alcohol is something else entirely. At some point, humans stopped finding alcohol and started creating it. And that is an extremely human thing to do. We discover something interesting, and immediately our next question becomes, can we make more of it? The exact moment this happened is lost to history. There was no ancient inventor who proudly announced, good news everyone, I've invented beer. But archaeologists have uncovered some incredible clues. In China, researchers discovered chemical traces inside pottery dating back roughly 9,000 years. The residue revealed a mixture of rice, fruit, and honey that had been intentionally fermented. In other words, people weren't accidentally drinking alcohol anymore. They were making it on purpose. Think about that for a second. 9,000 years ago, humans were already experimenting with recipes: rice, honey, fruit. Basically, the prehistoric version of throwing random ingredients into a bowl and hoping nobody dies. But even that might not be the beginning. At a site in Israel known as Rakafet Cave, researchers found evidence suggesting people may have been brewing a primitive beer around 13,000 years ago. That's before agriculture became widespread. And that creates a very strange possibility. What if beer came before farming? It sounds ridiculous, but some archaeologists have seriously discussed it. For years, people assumed agriculture was invented for food. Makes sense, right? Food is important. But alcohol offered something food didn't: celebration, ritual, social bonding, the ability to tolerate your neighbors for slightly longer periods of time. Some researchers have suggested that the desire to create reliable alcoholic drinks may actually have encouraged the development of farming. Now, to be clear, this idea is still debated. Historians are not running around claiming civilization was built entirely by drunk farmers. But the fact that the debate exists at all tells you how important alcohol may have been. Once civilizations appeared, alcohol spread everywhere. Ancient Egyptians drank beer daily. Mesopotamians brewed large quantities of it. The Greeks loved wine. The Romans expanded vineyards across Europe. Alcohol wasn't just a luxury. In many places, it became part of everyday life, and surprisingly, it may have been safer than water. Rivers and wells could become contaminated. People didn't know about bacteria or germs. They had no microscopes, no laboratories, no science videos explaining what was living in their drinking water, but they did have experience. And experience taught them that certain fermented drinks were less likely to make them sick. Alcohol also became deeply connected to religion. It appeared in rituals, ceremonies, festivals, and offerings. Across the ancient world, fermented drinks became symbols of celebration, community, and spirituality. But humans quickly learned something else. Alcohol had a dark side. The same drink that could bring people together could also cause terrible decisions. Ancient texts from thousands of years ago contain warnings about drunkenness. Even the earliest civilizations recognized the dangers of drinking too much, which means humanity's complicated relationship with alcohol is almost as old as civilization itself. Yet perhaps the strangest fact of all is that humans aren't the only animals that consume alcohol. Chimpanzees have been observed eating fermented fruit. Birds occasionally become intoxicated. Even elephants have been known to consume naturally fermented food. The difference is that no other species took things as far as humans did. We didn't just discover alcohol, we mastered it. We engineered it. We built traditions around it, industries around it, entire cultures around it, all from a chemical reaction that originally happened by accident on fallen fruit. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. The history of alcohol isn't really about drinking, it's about curiosity, experimentation, survival. It's about a species that constantly takes what nature provides and transforms it into something much bigger. So, when did humans start drinking alcohol? If we're talking about naturally fermented fruit, the answer may be millions of years ago. If we're talking about intentionally making alcoholic drinks, the evidence points to at least 9,000 to 13,000 years ago. Either way, humanity's relationship with alcohol is far older than most people realize. Older than cities, older than kingdoms, older than written history itself. Which means the next time someone says they're drinking for historical reasons, they might actually have a point.